Hi there, Tony O'Driscoll here, and welcome to the fifth installment of the backstory for Everyday Superhero. Richard Straub, who is a friend and colleague that I worked with at IBM and is now president of the Global Peter Drucker Forum, kindly said, this book integrates artful storytelling and thoughtful research to make change happen. And that's what I was looking to do, was to try to get into a narrative where all of the research that we know about what works at work to drive change was integrated, but it was done in a contextual way. And so here we are now at a point where Mae and Pratik have essentially been absorbed into the wackiness of the mucks, and they are about to figure out what's going to happen in the first meeting. And as they walk in the door, it's complete mayhem. All of the different executives are yelling at each other. It's their first experience with this. They're not exactly sure what to do, and it just becomes a swirl. Bucky Muck is saying there's no margin in this business. How are we going to do it? Stuffy Muck is, Dewey Muck is saying, hey, look, I don't care. I need to get my production lines up and going. Stuffy Muck is saying, hey, I need money for procurement. Sapien saying, hey, I need to put in requests to hire people. Wizzy Muck is saying, hey, what got us there won't get us here. We need to innovate. And Bucky's saying, forget your innovation. We're going to cut your budget. We have to get moving. And so it goes on until Chief Muck pounds his hand on the table and says, that's enough. I need a fail-proof plan by tomorrow. And then he turns to Mae and Pratik and says, I understand you two are in charge of getting the lines up and running and that you're the closest to this. So you better be sure that you answer all the questions that these mucks need. So I have a fail-proof plan on my desk tomorrow. So as you can see here, Mae and Pratik are on their way home. The mayhem is still going on. There's a little foreshadowing of what's happening in the background there, if you see what's happening with the building. And so the next morning, 6 a.m., they've only had 4 hours sleep. They meet with Bucky Muck, and he's basically saying, you need to figure out a 10-step plan for me to make a 40% margin on this. And then with Dewey Muck, they're saying, hey, we think that we need to get 40 other lines up and running, and we're going to use AI, and I need a plan from you on how we're going to do that. And this is very, very disorienting for Mae and Pratik because they've not worked with the mucks before, and they're just, the mucks are essentially barking what they perceive to be impossible orders. This is where they first meet Trickster, and Trickster is somebody who is a mentor. He's been around before. He's been in the swirl with the mucks and provides them a little bit of guidance. They start to understand that all of these separate requests from the different silos are not making a whole lot of sense, and the impossibility of the task continues to increase. By the end of the swirl with the mucks, because they have to deliver a plan that day, there is a big meeting in a dark room, and essentially Bucky Muck and Dewey Muck override Wizzy Muck and say, we're going to take your budget. We believe we can use AI, artificial intelligence. We're going to build robotic lines, and we've done the math, and we think we can produce the figs that we need in the time that we need. Now, Wizzy doesn't believe it. Certainly Mae and Pratik don't believe it, but a plan had to be developed, and so a plan was developed. It was presented to Muck, and then Chief Muck invites everybody into the atrium and explains how they're going to get more figs faster and going to get 8 billion figs out there to save people from the FUD. Of course, as people leave, they're dazed and confused because the people who work in the organization are like, that's crazy. How'd they come up with those numbers? There's no way we're going to be able to do it. We're not robots. So what happens next? Well, what happens next is Mae and Pratik start working through the Muck Immutable rule book, and they start trying to really impose hierarchy and dictate direction and so on and so forth, and it's really not going well. The pedometer is showing every subsequent day that they're falling further behind from their target. Their gap is getting bigger with each subsequent day, and it's just a huge exercise in futility. And then the environment encroaches, and they're starting to see undulations, FUD undulations, not unlike a little bit of a virus variant, if you will. And so all the plans that they had built to build the figs in one particular configuration now need to be able to address different configurations or variations of the FUD, and the whole plan starts to fall apart. As they start to do the projections, they realize that the best they could possibly do now, due to these fig undulations, is maybe coming up with 4 billion. And they know that Chief Muck's not going to be happy. You can see Bucky Muck saying, okay, that's in, game over. Our heads are going to roll when Chief Muck hears this tomorrow. Sure enough, at the next planning meeting, Chief Muck goes nonlinear, goes ballistic, and he demands performance and projects power. He says, no, this is completely unacceptable. I need a fail-proof plan to do it in 60 days. So now they're 30 days in. They're already only making half of what they had, and he's essentially yelling louder to demand the impossible in a shorter period of time. So that's those three pieces. And now we're going to start to see a shift, because as we're moving through ordinary world and we're coming to the approach, the story starts to change a little bit. So please join me for the next edition of the backstory, where we can learn about the approach.